attention a little bit more.
The setup begins early. By 10 a.m. there are already more than 15 people out at the Saanich Historical Artifact Societies, unpacking, folding tables, setting up generators, and stringing wire antennas through the trees. Now, under ordinary circumstances, these antics might be considered strange, but all I have to do is mention Field Day, and many amateur radio operators will know exactly what's going on. How long has the West Coast Amateur Radio Association been involved with Field Day?
Well, many decades actually. Probably, that 30-odd years out of the club, if not longer.
Al Muir is the technical director of Victoria, BC's West Coast Amateur Radio Association, and he explains a little of what Field Day is all about.
It's basically a North American contest that involves amateur radio and a contest structure to simulate emergency exercises such as generator running in the background to power equipment, solar powered, and things such as that. And the purpose is a 24-hour event which will be held every June every year, and as such is a purpose of getting emergency equipment such as you've seen here that will turn around and deal with such things as, again, a contest. The purpose of the contest obviously is to see how many stations in North America we can work from this site.
As Al mentioned, the Field Day activity encompasses a contest aspect as well. Points are awarded based on the number of contacts made and the type of mode used to make the contact. For example, contacts made using CW or Morse code are awarded 2 points, while contacts made using voice communications are awarded 1. Any communications made over packet radio are awarded 2 points as well. And as one can imagine, setting up an effective, temporary amateur radio station presents a few unique challenges. The most obvious difficulty is in stringing up the antennas themselves, but this seasoned group of Field Day radio operators has the routine down pat. The most interesting device they use is similar to a potato gun. A weighted tennis ball is shot out of the end and flung over a tree. The ball is attached to a line which can be used to hoist the antenna up in the air. This year, the potato gun wasn't the only thing in action. Jens is an arborist from Duncan who showed up with his slingshot to fire some of those antenna lines over trees as well. And seeing this giant slingshot in action was nothing short of impressive. As the day wore on, it became apparent that this was more than just an amateur radio exercise. It is, in fact, an entire social event. Folks show up just to get together and chat, sometimes bringing friends and family along with them, and of course, they show up to eat. This year, Field Day also presented an opportunity to remember those who are no longer with us. George Green was an active member of both the West Coast Amateur Radio Association and the Victoria New Horizons Amateur Radio Club for many years. And in November of 2010, George unfortunately passed away. This year, George was remembered by his son, who gave a speech for the crowd.
I always watched my father spend many nights on his ham radio. I teased him quite a bit that he was always collecting weather reports from Oak Bay, Saanich, wherever he contacted. Yep. And that he was waiting for the big call, the Mayday, which he never got. But in actuality, when you look at it, as you trudge life's road, it's not the wealth we gather monetarily, it's the wealth we gather in friendships. And I know my dad considered each and every one of you in this club as friends and family, and that you contributed to the richness of his life and made his life so enjoyable in his retirement.
George's wife, Rita, was also given the opportunity to cut the 2011 Field Day cake. Now, needless to say, there is a rather large variety of radio equipment set up here, and I'm going to just briefly go through some of the equipment that's set up. Over here, we've got a HF voice section, which is, of course, most familiar to people, making long-distance communications over using voice protocol, using single sideband or AM. Now, if you follow me over here, we've got an HF CW setup, CW or Morse code as it's more familiar to most people. Basically sending Morse code transmissions over long distances and making communications. Now over here, Here we've got a packet system set up, and if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that packet is a form of sending data over FM VHF radio, and I was informed this year that packet is indeed part of Field Day, and sure enough, we've got a laptop computer running into a TNC, running into a VHF radio, making some communications. Finally, we've got a third voice HF rig set up in the trailer there, and that one's running to obviously a different antenna than the Delta Loop that the main HF station's running on, but again, it's possible to make some further contacts on this station as well. 100, 200, 300. As the number of contacts kept climbing, it became quickly apparent that the weather conditions needed to facilitate good radio communications were being met.
Solar flux is something that concerns all high-frequency amateur radio operators and users.
James Hatch is a local amateur radio operator who enjoys tracking weather conditions on the solar surface. He explained to me about how the sun affected ham radio signals.
It is the density of what we used to term the E and F layers, the heaviside layers, and it's the thickness of those layers which gives us the reflective quality that we require. And to have the reflective qualities, one has to rely on protons from the sun strengthening those layers, and that comes in the form of solar winds from coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, and of course from the sunspots as they erupt and so forth. The more we have, the denser the actual layer becomes. So that, in a brief nutshell, is what happens. I hope this explains it to a few of you. We are now coming into 24. We're in the summer doldrums at the moment, but come latter part of August, September, we should see an increase.
The amount of solar radiation is represented by something called the solar flux unit. In layman's terms, the higher the SFU, the better the possible radio communications. This year, the SFU was about 93, which is much better than the low to mid-80s I have seen in the past. As day moved into night, the radios remained in operation, and the Field Day setup was still a flurry of activity. After all, Field Day is a 24-hour event, and it would be a shame if the station was in operation for anything less than the full 24 hours.
I kind of collapsed around 11:30, between 11:30 and 12. I fell asleep to the soulful rhythm of the generator. And then somebody got up and started operating that little station we had there, and it woke me up. But then I went back to sleep. But when I woke up in the morning, I realized that I had slept with my knife on this side. And what happened was I couldn't roll over, right? It was kind of like a prop on this one side, but I survived. It was like being a Boy Scout again. And I'm going to do it again. This is not my last time, okay? I didn't sour on the experience, Christopher.
For Field Day 2011, the West Coast Amateur Radio Association made over 300 Morse code contacts, 200 single sideband voice contacts, and 7 packet communications. Additionally, throughout the course of the 24 hours, over 150 people showed up, both members of the amateur radio community and non-members, for at least part of the event. Finally, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Nick, VA7 November Alpha Foxtrot, who acted as my cameraman for at least part of this video. Without Nick's assistance, I would not have had any of the setup footage and nearly as much background footage as I did. There is no doubt that the numbers for Field Day 2011 are going to be quite difficult to beat in future years, but there is also no doubt that this same dedicated group of amateur radio operators will be out next year trying to do just that.